Our topic is the portrait of King Matthias. We are going to speak about this king of Renaissance. He was king of Hungary between 1458 and 1490. And of course, we have to touch a lot of topics within his reign or rulership. First of all, we are going to his family. Well, this family is coming from out of the Carpats, from Wallachia, Havasalföld, so it's originally territory of Romanians. His father was János Hunyadi János, who was a fantastic soldier. He made a very good career in the court of Sigismund of Luxembourg, and he learned everything about fighting. He knew the Hussite warfares of the Czechs, and he is said to be the Turk beater. He was governor of Hungary for a short period, and of course, by his successes, he got more and more lands, and when he was in his late ages, he became the greatest landowner of Hungary. Mother of Mátyás was Szilágyi Erzsébet, and this is how his uncle Szilágyi Mihály was also a famous fighter against the Turks. He was, for example, the captain of Nándorfehérvár. Hunyadi László, he was the brother. He was the older brother, and this is why he was the original heir of the Hunyadi lands and properties. And of course, he was murdered, and after this murder, Mátyás became the new leader of the Hunyadi lands and later became king. He got perfect education. Mátyás, he spoke foreign languages. He had humanist education from Vitéz János. He spoke Latin, Italian, French, and other languages as well. And of course, from his very early age, he helped changing letters in different languages, correspondence. Well, he became king of Hungary according to agreements. Well, Ladislas V was the king of Hungary, but he died unexpectedly after the Nándorfehérvár battle. But he executed Matthias's brother Hunyadi László and left the country. And in this flee, he took Matthias himself with him. So he was a prisoner in Prague. And this is when he was forced to marry Catherine Podjebrad by the local landowner and noble. And this is why Catherine was the first wife of Matthias. This was not a happy marriage. Catherine died very soon. So in Hungary, the baronial leagues, the Hunyadi League and the Cillei-Garai League, they were rivals. And finally, they had, of course, different interests, and finally they agreed that a young, hopefully easy to influence King Matthias should be crowned. This is why he was crowned very early, at his early age, in 1458, and became king of Hungary on the Danube, on the ice of the Danube, in January. So we have a young king, but this young king is not easy to influence because he very soon centralized power. He was very strict and confident from this early age. He was really, of course, because of his education, and very confident. And he put aside all the enemies. Even Szilágyi Mihály, who was chosen to be some kind of helper or his most important advisor, he sent Szilágyi Mihály to the southern borders to fight the Turks, and he died there. So he decided on his own. He started a kind of absolutistic rulership, which at that time was not absolutism was not yet in Europe, but this was some kind of absolutism. He strengthened the rights of nobility. He gave a lot of titles, so he made some loyal people, and he put his people in positions. It really often happened when even low layer people got positions. New baron families raised. For example, the Sapoye family would be important in the Turkish period, and the Báthory family also. And so even from the lowest layers, he got people. 1463, he bought back the Holy Crown from Frederick III, Holy Roman Emperor. We don't have to speak about how the crown became in the property of the Holy Roman Emperor, but this was a great unfortunate expense, because 80,000 forints was a fortune, and at that time Matthias knew that he would have heirs, he would have children, so he signed a contract of succession with the Habsburgs. If he doesn't have son, Habsburgs will get the throne. Actually, he didn't know that he wouldn't have a legally accepted son. He also transformed royal administration. He reformed everything, and he employed experts, those who learned in universities of Europe, even civilian or serf origin, so the lowest layers got possibilities, opportunities. These were very loyal to him, and he reformed the chancellery, centralized power, so all the offices he could control. So everything was centralized in his hands. But this kind of policy a lot of people didn't like. So finally a conspiracy was organized against him in 1470. Even Janus Pannonius, the famous Hungarian humanist poet, was in this conspiracy, and the conspiracy was not successful, so Matthias could stop them, and these people had to go to exile. So what about his incomes? He of course maximized incomes. There was a growing population, more tax could be collected, but mines were running out. Charles Roberts' time mines were full, but now they were out. So most of his incomes coming from taxes of serfs. Of course, he exchanged or transformed the gate tax. He created smoke tax. It was paid by households, families, so each fireplace had to pay actually. And the 30th tariff, the tax of the traders, were raised and became royal tariff, Koronaván. And the greatest income, of course, was war tax. It is often called extraordinary war tax, rendkívüli hadiadó. It was 1 forint, it was a golden forint, sometimes twice taken a year. It was a huge amount of money, but this is how he got a huge income. 750,000 forints a year he could have. Just to compare, the next king after Matthias, the Ulászló II, would have maximum 200,000. So absolutely a fantastic income, comparable to Western European incomes of kings. But just to compare, the Sultan, the Turkish Empire, had 1.8 million income, so that was incomparable with the Turkish incomes. This picture shows us the incomes of the king. I told you the smoke tax, the royal tariff, and everything. And as you see, most of his income is coming from this war tax. So we can say that the huge income is coming from the serfs, of course. There are also income from salt and different cities and some tariffs as well. But as you see, the extraordinary war tax is greatest income. What did he spend on? Well, he had a lot of money, so he had a lot of expenses. Black Army, defending the country. He had ambitions. and of course he had a very expensive court. The Black Army was a modern mercenary army, so he paid them. And I can tell you that he had to pay each soldiers 1 forint. So the tax of one serf for a year is given to a soldier in a month. They knew everything about modern warfare, Hussite warfare, modern weapons, Polish, German, and Hungarian soldiers. One of the famous leaders, generals, was Kinizsi Pál, who was originally of serf origin. He was working in a mill, and there is the legend that he offered, of course, the uh, um, offered drink to the king on a millstone, and this is how everyone knew that he was so strong. Well, of course, this is a tale, but Kinizsi Pál was a famous leader. Approximately 15-20,000 soldiers in the Black Army. Very expensive. Now we have to go into defense. Yes, the Turkish are attacking. Turkish fights in the southern part of the country, but this was mostly defensive wars. No decisive war. So actually there was no winner. He secured the southern borders, that's all. It was successful. He broke into Bosnia and he took Jajca, an important fortress from the Turks. At Kenyermező, famous battle, you will find it on the maps. Transylvania was defended. So this was all about defense, but there was no decisive war. He didn't follow the pattern of his father in this, because Matthias had ambitions. He wanted to go to the West and conquer the West. He wanted to be Holy Roman Emperor, which is very hard to become, because there are prince electors who elect the Holy Roman Emperor, 9 of them. So actually he has to be supported by the European leaders. But he was not supported. His name, Hunyadi, was not a great name in Europe. So he had to prove, he had to occupy Western territories. He occupied to the west, towards the west, Moravia, Silesia, so Czech territories, and became Czech king because Czech king was a prince-elect of the Holy Roman Empireship. Well, he was not acknowledged. He also occupied Vienna, so proving that he is so strong that he should be the next Holy Roman Emperor. But the German princes didn't choose him to become. In this map you see the southern border fights with the Turks. This is the famous Kenyermező victory, and these are those where the Turks broke in and then left the country, so some defensive wars in the south. And this is the western conquests, Silesia and Moravia, the Czech territories. He had to share the Czech throne with other king, but he was Czech king and the crown prince. He also occupied territory from Austria, like Steyr, Carinthia, and Vienna, of course. So these Western ambitions were successful in territories, but actually they were not successful in becoming the Holy Roman Emperor. But as you see in this map, there they have, the king Matthias had a lot of diplomatic connections. These lines are showing that. So he, at that time, was an important ruler of Europe, but unfortunately he couldn't make his empire inherited by his son. He also spent a lot of money on culture. He was the king of the Renaissance period. He was patron of arts and sciences, so he invested in a lot in sciences and arts. He had a second wife, Beatrice, from Italy, and she brought a lot of foreign artists like Antonio Bonfini and Galeotto Marzio to Hungary, and they created chronicles about him. He tried to make his family to become famous. He made these people write about his family as one of the oldest families of Europe. He tried some dynastic marketing. Uh, there was Janus Pannonius, famous Hungarian poet. He had a Renaissance court. I would mention Visegrad as a new palace, and Buda Palace was transformed to be a Renaissance palace. He had a fantastic hunting residence in the Buda Palace, and of course the whole territory of the Taban behind the palace was hunting territory. He collected books. He loved books. Of course, these were handmade, very expensive books, the so-called Corvinas. So he had a library as well. He could read and write. Very nice handmade decorated books, second largest library in the world, because the first was the Vatican Library at that time. He also supported music, Renaissance music, so his court could have been a fantastic Renaissance court. These are very expensive things, so this is how he spent all his incomes. Let's talk about the end of his life. He had a real problem of succession because he had no official heir. He had a son, Corvin János, John Corvin. This name Corvin is the Latin word for the crow, hollow, in his coat of arms, family coat of arms. Actually, he was an illegitimate son. The mother was a girl from Vienna, and of course Matthias wanted to make him legitimate. He wanted him to be accepted by the Hungarian nobility and the barons, but it was a failure. He called the Diet and gave out laws. He gave out the decrees on the Palatine, a nádori törvényeket. He wanted to make the Palatine more important, and after the death of the king, the Palatines first elect, so when they elect a king, the Palatine should vote first. He expected that the Palatine would give his vote to Corvin János, and by that he would be the next king. It was not successful. Well, finally he died in Vienna. Maybe a fig poisoned him, but it was several times disproved by historians, so we don't know the real cause of his death. But he died in Vienna, and he couldn't fulfill what he wanted. He couldn't pass the throne to his son. We also have to remember that he became a legendary king. He was he in his in his reign, life was very hard in this empire because the serfs had serious burdens, heavy taxes, and of course it was really hard to survive. But it was clear for the serfs that there was order and peace in the country, defended the country, and was a great king. So after his death, there was disorder coming. There were kings who lost their power, and then the Turkish period came within 30 years. So this is why we can say that he was a positive ruler in the eyes of the people. So this is how folk tales appeared about him, that he was seen disguised and he was a just king. He always judged people well. So this is how these folk tales appeared. I think this is what we have to know about King Matthias.